All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Gather round, grab a seat. Don't be shy to sit next to somebody you don't know. That's part of this session.
We'll help you break the awkwardness.
Francesca will be joining us in 10 minutes or so. She is at a speaking engagement right now. These politicians are...
I know. They're so busy.
They're so busy. Okay, so thanks again for being here. This is the Culinary Creativity with Fruits and Nuts of Agroforestry. I am Erin Crooks-Lynch from the Savannah Institute, and in a moment I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves. But first of all, we want to learn a bit about you. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and you can keep it up for as many categories as you fall into. But how many of you are farmers or growers or gardeners?
Does past count? Like
yes.
Once upon a time I was?
Past, future, present, all the above. Oh, wow. Okay. How many of you are home cooks? Awesome. We're in good company. We're in good company. Yeah. How many of you are professional cooks or in the professional food industry? Awesome. I'll raise my hand too. Any educators, academics? Okay, great. Artists, writers, creatives. Awesome. Local food and perennial food enthusiasts. Everyone?
I used to say that better be everybody.
Awesome. Well, a lot of home cooks, a lot of growers. This is great.
You're
okay.
All tired.
So as you can tell, we want this to be interactive. This is a kitchen table conversation that we're having. And we're going to be putting up a QR code that links you to a Google Doc that you can contribute to. So it's a place with resources for cookbooks and our panelists' contact information if you have questions. And what else do we have on there? Places to source berries and nuts, things like that. And we'd love you to contribute because this is a community effort. So I'm going to start with you, Beth. Will you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Beth Dooley. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so grateful to Erin for all the work she's done in sort of herding us cats. And thanks, everybody, for showing up, and thanks for being home cooks, because I'm quite sure that if everybody cooked more, we'd all be healthier, we'd all have better food, we'd have better land, and you know, I really celebrate people that are willing to do that work with their hands. I am a food writer, cookbook author. I write for the Star Tribune. I also co-wrote the book with Sean Sherman, who you may have heard earlier today. Awesome. And I write a lot about the issues around local food and farming. I also am an endowed chair at for the Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture, and I work really closely with the people that are engaged in Forever Green Initiative. And I'm delighted to be here. And actually, I have another book coming out. It's just hitting the stands in about a month, and it's called Chili, Clove, and Cardamom, a gastronomic journey into the hot, dry plants of our world. And it was co-written with Gary Paul Nabaum, who is a good friend of the Savannah Institute and a wonderful ethnobotanist and a really good storyteller. So a lot of my work is telling these stories. So, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Beth, would you help me write my book, please?
Of course, I would be honored, Odessa. I would be really honored. You need to know that this is like a fangirl club. I've been such a fan of Odessa's and her work for millennia, so yes.
Well, and just, so you said it so quickly, so that was Chili, Clove, and Cardamom.
Correct.
Is the name of your
Yes.
baby book just coming out.
Yes.
That with Gary Paul Nabaum. Run, don't walk to the bookstore to get that. That's going to be an amazing book. Oh, golly. I didn't get much sleep last night, which could mean that this could be a very exciting introduction, or I could really bore you to tears. I'm going to try really hard to keep it on the exciting side. But I did want to just fill in one thing about our goals. We're really hoping to make this session be super useful to each of you. And so we're very keen to know, as we're I'll introduce myself in a second, but as we kind of dive into it, we're very keen to know what brought you here, and if you would also be willing to share that with your table mate, and also kind of sharpen your demands of us, because we really want to make our experience and our knowledge grow with yours, what you can contribute to this panel today. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. So I'm Odessa Piper, and my big claim to fame in the Midwest is I ran a wonderful farm-to-table restaurant for 30 years, L'Etoile restaurant, right on the Capitol Square, and we grew with the farmers market. The restaurant is continuing to operate with my beloved chef, Tori Miller, who is relocated it just one block to a modern building, and L'Etoile continues, and we will be celebrating our combined 50th anniversary in just a year and a half. So yes, that's very exciting.
That's a remarkable run.
You know, I'm actually going to put it out there, if there's any producers or documentarians in the room, we would love to take the thread of our story of L'Etoile and actually weave it into a larger tapestry of the amazing story of the driftless region of this part of Wisconsin, because L'Etoile's success and viability was very much a part of all the farmers, all the eaters, all the academes, all the community builders, all the cooks, all the dishwashers, all the message carriers that have really been drawn to this region. That's why it's very exciting to be here today. So L'Etoile was my big thing, but one of the frustrating things about it was that we had to be a very high-end and expensive restaurant because we were doing a lot of the early R&D on bringing local foods to the table and to the public. And now the good news is that local foods are much more filled into our infrastructure, and we have new and delightful problems about how to find more empowered eaters. So I guess I call them food citizens. And so the second chapter in my sort of food career after L'Etoile is I'm now working on setting up a little bakery in Boston. I live in a very, very diverse neighborhood, which is sort of in a way a food desert. We have all the problems of modernity and unassimilated wealth, where there's a tremendous amount of junk food all throughout my community, as well as a beautiful farmers market and an amazing community of people of every age and every skin color and every cultural ethnicity. I mean, we are the landing pad for immigrants. It's a fascinating community. So I'm working on a little business that will basically be teaching community cooking classes to get more empowered eaters, and also doing some baking and product development with agroforestry and again, the local food economy, and just getting that out there at more street level prices. That was very long-winded, but I think that was the...
I think it was great. Okay. Can you guys hear me with my mic like this? Great. Awesome. Well, for my next question, I really want Francesca to be here, but we'll start off and maybe she'll arrive. Beth, what does being an empowered eater mean to you?
It's a great question. I think, one of the things that helped me become a more empowered eater was the advent of the CSAs, because I have to confess that I'm not a very good gardener. We have a shady backyard with not much room to grow vegetables, but I love the farmers markets, and I love to this day being a member of a CSA, because it changed the way I thought about food. I became a more reactive cook. I stopped marching into the farmer's market with a list of recipes and ingredients that I needed to cook. And when I was faced with a CSA box that was filled mostly with kohlrabi, for instance, I had to figure it out, right? And so I think it's really the ability to respond to what's coming in locally without feeling as though you're a, quote, consumer, that you're more of a partner with the people that are growing our food. And to me, that's the way I approach recipes now, and that's what's embedded in the column that I write, is like, how do we do that? How do we unlock ourselves from this very prescriptive, really consumerist point of view when we go into the kitchen?
Wonderful. Odessa, do you want to add to that?
I guess only in the sense that I'm wondering how many of us here are kind of thinking those same thoughts about, the difference between a consumer and an empowered eater. What does an empowered eater mean? I know I'm very keen to find out what you're thinking about that and how you're using whatever your journey is in food to bring that about. But I love to play with that idea of the empowered eater, and so I take it's interesting. I sort of came up with kind of like a citizen, a food citizen, what is a food citizen? What is our Bill of Rights? Maybe it starts out with, we the eaters want to take care of this planet. So I actually wrote a new Pledge of Allegiance I wanted to share with you. I pledge allegiance to the earth and all the beings for whom she plants, one cosmos made by love, with gratitude and justice for all. And I warned you I didn't get a lot of sleep last night and that it might get dangerous. But just, we have the food citizen is the one who realizes that, they are part of the food system. The consumer is a sort of passive endpoint receiver, and we see so much damage. I took a little late walk last night down Madison State Street and looked at all the food operations, basically selling to the students of the University of Wisconsin, and I felt like it felt like a food desert. It was really rather alarming. Everything takeout, everything coming out of the store in plastic, people sitting, eating, looking at their computer, eating alone. I mean, there's nothing wrong with eating alone or looking at the computer. I guess I just struggled with how many resources of this great nation of ours are just kind of seem to be going the wrong direction to, consumers and endless growth. So this idea of the food citizen is that we kind of take back our food systems. We take it back, and a great way to take it back is in the kitchen, just in our daily cooking for ourselves and our families. But I noticed that many people raised hands, they're educators or in academia, and also what a powerful thing that if we could teach our food system to the young people in schools. I'm thinking of Sean and what he spoke about this morning. I mean, boy, that was just like one sermon about the empowered eater, right? What he was really telling us. Well, so I'll end it there.
Great, thank you. Now that we've circled back to the kitchen, let's talk about perennial foods and how you use them in the kitchen. Do you want to start, Beth, with the hazelnut, or?
I have to say, run, don't walk over to the hazelnut table. They are amazing. I love the smaller local hazelnuts that have been bred to be, they're an indigenous food, and thanks to our universities that are marrying really traditional ecological knowledge with science, they are hybridizing. It's not GMO. These nuts to become a little more vigorous and viable and to work better in the kitchen. They're a little bit larger than the wild nuts, but what I love about them is they have way more flavor than the European varieties that are different. Those grow on tall trees, and they grow a little bit on the West Coast, and most of them come out of Oregon. The rest are coming out of Europe, Italy, and Turkey. Well, and 98% of the hazelnuts or filberts you find in our stores are coming out of Turkey. Now, that's not a very stable market, right? And we can grow a lot of hazelnuts. They're the fastest rising protein plant-based sourced in the world. So they're, a really good source of a plant protein. They are incredibly delicious. And the thing I love about the American Hazelnut Company is that they're pre-roasting the nuts, so you don't have to roast them and rub their skins off. They're just ready to go, so they're great for that. They're delicious on salads. They're wonderful on breads. The other thing about this company is, and it's a farmers collective, the other thing I love about it is that they roast the best nuts, then they take the what's left from the roasting, and they also take the nuts that aren't perfect, and they roast those, and then they press them into oil. And it's a beautiful culinary oil that's got a high heat smoke point. It's higher than olive oil. It retains its flavor in baking and sautéing. And once they've pressed the oil, they take what's left and they grind it into flour. So they're using the whole darn thing, right? And it's delicious, and it's a gluten-free flour, and it's got some protein in it. So anyway, that's my new jam is hazelnuts. They're so good.
And Matt and Connor are walking around with some hazelnuts that were grown on an SI farm, the North Farm. If you came out on Saturday to the open house, you'll notice the husk on there, and just take a look. It's a show and tell. Do you want to talk about the recipe that the little surprise we have for everyone?
Yeah, we're going to be passing out a recipe. It's with the hazelnut meal. It's not really a flour. It's much drier. It's not like almond flour because the oil's been pressed out, but it does behave really well if you add some oil. It's just the meal, the oil, salt, and I added cheese. It's got cheese in it. So it's a takeoff on those old-fashioned cheese coins that you find in old recipe books. And a lot of these new crops are really fun to experiment with, and most of them you can figure out how to work into your own recipes. With the hazelnut flour, be careful that don't use 1-on-1 ratio with flour. It behaves differently. And there are recipes from the American Hazelnut Company that you can get online, and I've got some in my cookbook. So.
How many people would feel brave enough to switch hazelnut flour in for wheat flour, for AP flour? Oh, we've got a pretty hazelnut literate group here. I'm really impressed, because Beth, I did try that. I was scared. It felt my fear. I guess I would just rush to your book for some guidelines.
Well, I think it's more with any change, start slowly, right? Take a recipe you really love, like a cookie recipe, right? And maybe substitute out 1/4 cup of AP flour for the hazelnut flour. And if you like that, then you can maybe push it a little bit, and maybe do 1/2 cup to a whole cup. And if you really like it, then you can push the whole cup and see what happens, right?
It sounds like me and whole wheat flour when I'm making my sourdough bread of just... I started out with 100% whole wheat and actually learned the hard way that I should back it up and sift it and go with 100% sifted and then gradually add the bran back in. That made a lot more sense. Beth, you mentioned something about like rubbing the skins off, and I realize in a lot of recipes maybe that's appropriate, but in the spirit of flavor and texture, oftentimes the skins that a fruit or a nut comes with hold a lot of flavor and a lot of nutrition and a lot of interest. So my bias is to just like jump in with the hazelnut and use them skin on.
Well, you can. You're supposed to with the American Hazelnut Company hazelnuts, because their skins are so thin. That's one of the benefits from them. With the European nut, those skins tend to be bitter, which is why people like. And they also, when you roast them, those skins kind of flake off anyway. They kind of burn. So with these, they're ready to go. You don't have to mess with them at all. Which to your point, you're getting more of the fiber. You're getting more of the flavor. You're probably getting more of the nutrients too, because so many nutrients are in those skins. I will though caution people that hazelnut flour, because it is gluten-free, won't respond to yeast, so you can't use it. It's not good for making a bread dough with, unless you're using a little bit of it. So.
Does anyone have any questions about hazelnuts or using hazelnuts? Or, yeah?
How do you open this?
You need a nutcracker. You need a hammer.
You go to the American Hazelnut Company
Yeah.
and buy a bag of hazelnuts.
Yeah. Anybody got a hammer here? Yeah.
But to that point about going to the hazelnut company and buying some nuts, just before I came up here to sit down, I grabbed a handful of American hazelnuts and was chopping them down. And the flavor is still echoing in my mouth. The flavor is so resonant and so delicious. I want to go home and just cook with hazelnuts now forever. Hey, here's our friend.
Welcome, Francesca.
I'm so sorry I'm late.
No, we're having a great time, but
Work my way in. Go.
well,
We already pressed for time.
well, actually, let's introduce you though, and
Yeah, here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your generosity. Like a true politician, I am late. I am so sorry. When I was still working in restaurants, this was never the case. I'm State Representative Francesca Hong. I hope when I meet you all, you'll call me Fran. Really honored to be on this panel. Just a quick, brief 5-second story. Born and raised in Madison. I've been service industry for the last 16 years. Recently closed my restaurant, Morris Ramen. Came into office in 2021, but all of these things are deeply connected because I'm connected to food, and food connects all of us. So just really excited to learn from so many of you today and from our amazing panelists.
Fran, tell us your office, what you do for the state of Wisconsin.
Yes, so I'm the state representative for the 76th Assembly District, so you're actually in my district right now. It's a majority of the Isthmus, so all the way from Broome Street, right near campus, down past the airport, and I now have the Old Brick and Eastmoreland neighborhoods as well.
And I was wondering, Erin, if you could maybe explain why we wanted Fran on this panel with us.
Yeah. Here.
Well, I want Fran to tell us why she feels so, why she's on this panel. We asked the question, what does it mean to be an empowered eater? And I know you have some thoughts on that.
I love this question. I think an empowered eater is a curious eater. I'm late because, sorry, the public school, our East High School students, I stayed there a little longer than I was supposed to, but when I'm around young people, especially our students, their curiosity is what drives me to do the work that I'm in, especially during this time of absurdity when it comes to policymaking and politics. So an empowered eater has to be a curious eater. An empowered eater has to be somebody who is excited to connect the dots, right? Because our food systems and food systems work can seem very kind of vague or like meta almost to a lot of people when you think about the words food systems. It makes sense to us, but I think for the everyday person, they might not be thinking about their food as a part of a system. But when you're a curious eater and you're able to kind of connect the dots about why the world may be the way it is, why our things are happening in our neighborhoods, what's happening with our health, all of that goes back to the connection that we're seeing in food policy, to community organizing, to grocery stores. And when you're a curious eater, you become empowered because you're able to connect those dots, and then you want to learn more about it.
Thank you. A lot of these perennial ingredients you can't find in the store. So your interest in them, you're already, an activist because you need to figure out where they're coming from. You need to connect directly with the producer. You need to find out how to use it. You're not finding an easy recipe, an easy way to incorporate this. So being interested in perennial foods is already being a food advocate, a curious eater, an empowered eater. Odessa, do you want to share about berries, aronia berries? Do you want to dive into that, or did you have?
I have so much to say. And just a quick thing on Fran's points. How many people have read the Farm Bill? Yeah, right. So we have dear Fran here in politics as a legislator, kind of working on systems at that level. But we've heard the Farm Bill mentioned many times over the course of today and tomorrow because it is a real regulatory behemoth, and though we don't have to, put it under our pillow when we sleep at night, it's thank God we have you, Fran, working in politics. And I think in a way I feel like a soldier, a foot soldier for the good food movement in the area of retail. I guess so to answer your pitch, Erin, about berries, I'll just start with saying that I give myself permission to be passionately in love with berries. I mean, just as a culinary person, I mean, they are amazing. I mean, the flavor, the texture. I'm talking about, I'll zoom in on Aronia, but just elderberry, mulberry, blueberry, blackberry, black currants, Aronia. We're talking about, like, they've got, it's a complete package. Am I still there? It's got the nutrition, it's got flavor, it's got density, it's got texture. And and I guess not the most important thing, but as essential, it's got the food system. It comes to me from smallholder farmers. And it comes to me by virtue of alive, intact communities and community food networks and systems that might get it to me. And so for me, a berry is as much the soil it comes from and the stewards of that soil and the communities that make it possible to obtain them as it does with the flavor, if that makes any sense. I could go on at length about every berry, but I want to make a particular shout out today to Aronia berries and black currants. And later, we have a fun little brownie that will be set out a bit later, about the time everyone feels like they might need a little jolt of sugar or coffee. I apologize, it is made with a traditional amount of sugar, the way that brownies are, but we're going to forgive the sugar because it's a very helpful vehicle with the chocolate and to make this point. So I used an Aronia berry that had already been juiced, and so upcycling the pumice, that's the spent berry, still has all that nutrition and all sorts of chewiness, really cool with chocolate, and the fact that we can dream about Aronia berries possibly becoming like chocolate's best friend and being like maybe in a brownie mix in a supermarket somewhere with whole rye flour and black currants also in the mix. It's a great way of entering Aronia into like the economic hydraulics of getting locally grown foods into the mainstream. So this brownie has like these chewy Aronia berries in the base, and then it has a little thumbprint where some extremely delicious and provocative black currant jam is placed. And black currants are the most curiously tart fruit I have ever encountered. And the combination of the black currant, which has a lot to say flavor-wise, with the texture and the nutrition of the Aronia, which is a little more shy and subtle. Aronia is not like, it doesn't hit you like a locomotive with sweetness or with tartness, but it's a very virtuous fruit nonetheless. So, but I put them together in the brownie, and I should also give a shout out for whole grain rye flour. We're so lucky we have Meadowlark granary here in the Midwest. And rye is also another very, very important sustainable food in our food chain. So this particular brownie has all of those elements, which is kind of fun.
And rye goes so well with chocolate.
Yes.
Can you throw some hazelnuts in that brownie too?
Well, we're going to do, to Beth's request about hazelnuts, I think hazelnuts are such a fantastic diva that I want to give hazelnuts her own stage. So I'm going to do, a chocolate hazelnut rye brownie.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, perfect.
Francesca, you were just a part of the harvest dinner with Elena Terry. Were there any perennial foods at that dinner that really spoke to you, or any that have any cultural significance for you and your family? Any perennial foods that speak to you?
Well, the harvest dinner was magical. For those of you who may not be familiar, we had our 4th annual harvest dinner this past September. It's this amazing gathering of food champions, empowered eaters, folks in the community who are really doing the work to bring us back on this path of food sovereignty by centering Black and Indigenous chefs and those foodways. And we do this at Dan Cornelius's farm, and it benefits both the Elder Food Box project that's happening up in the Chippewa Valley for Indigenous elders. I also love that this past year they've really grown their connection and relationships with Hmong farmers up in the area as well to produce these food boxes to provide to elders. And then it also supports Reap Food. And I have to give out a shout out to both Reap and Rooted, organizations that are really championing and centering education, community, and land when it comes to food innovation or food empowerment and farm-to-school programs. But at the harvest dinner, I'm always amazed at our ability to kind of just communicate through food, right? And while I don't remember at the time, I don't remember right now all the perennials that were used for the menu, I do know that at harvest time, I always think about chestnuts because I'm Korean American, so my parents they immigrated here in the late 80s, and for us, our harvest festival is Chuseok, and it's a time of welcoming the new harvest, going into the next season, and doing what we call chesa, which is where we place an offering for ancestors who have passed. We always in my family, we always like to put my grandparents' favorite foods, and my grandma loved to drink beer and iced coffee after dinner, so we usually have a cup of coffee and a little pint of spotted cow or something. But traditionally, what's always offered for everyone's chesa is our chestnuts, usually fruit, either apples or persimmon, and then a soup and a rice cake, songpyeon. And I've actually gotten curious, and I think getting ready for this panel has inspired me to try making songpyeon not just with rice flour, but actually putting in some chestnut flour as well, because often the filling can be a sesame seed, chestnuts, just boiled chestnuts, and mukrat roots. So the harvest dinner is always a time for deep reflection on what the harvest means for so many different cultures and communities across the world. And then particularly for me, chestnuts, not only are they an offering for the chesa table, but chestnuts now are, they're the favorite go-to street food, just steamed chestnuts on the street. People cut them in half and scoop them out with a little spoon. We have a lot of tiny forks and spoons for fruit and after dinner things in Korean culture. But that chestnuts are also what I started putting into my Thanksgiving stuffing because I'd known how much I loved eating chestnuts in the fall, or would get pictures of family eating chestnuts in the fall from Korea. So perennials absolutely have this connection to the harvest season. And I was just really fortunate to be able to, feel and see a lot of these experiences at the harvest dinner, but also be able to make a lot of those connections back to memories and the culture and how much chestnuts really, mean to me and my family. Beth, you got to talk too.
We are passing around chestnuts, if you've never seen one, in the shell. That is, they're also harvested from a Savannah Institute farm.
Can I give another shout out to chestnuts? Because I grew up with chestnuts. I grew up on the East Coast, right? And so chestnuts roasting over an open fire in New York City, those were probably Italian chestnuts. Those are the great big ones. But my grandmother had one of the last chestnut trees on her property in New Jersey before it got wiped out by the blight. And it's really interesting because there's so much work being done by the American Chestnut Foundation. Brandon Rudder is here, and Phil Rudder, his dad, on Badger Set Research Farm, they're doing amazing work. It's taking forever to breed what they're calling the Americanoid chestnut. It's a fabulous chestnut because it's smaller, and it's got tons of flavor, but those trees are absolutely gorgeous. They grow to be about 20 feet tall. They have enormous canopies. back when they were going gangbusters on the East Coast, you know, if you saw them in bloom, it looked like the whole hillside was covered with snow. And because those chestnuts all got wiped out because of a virus that hit in the, I want to say, I can't remember when, it was the like early 1950s, I think, or 40s. The DNR chopped them all down and used them for the fence posts along the Appalachian Trail. They're still there because it's an amazing wood. It's rot resistant. It makes gorgeous furniture. You'll see it if you go to Monticello or any of those places. It's used in a lot of those old colonial homes. But the chestnut trees are coming back thanks to the work of a lot of our growers to figure out how to grow trees that are blight resistant. And chestnut flower is amazing. It's so great. And there are lots of things you can do with chestnuts. They're wonderful for animals. Pigs that eat chestnuts are the pigs that made the Smithfield hams. Taste so good back in the day in Virginia. And they're incredibly nutritious. They're loaded with protein. They also contain some carbohydrate. They can be dried and then rehydrated for soups and things like that. They can also be ground into flour, but they are fabulous fresh. And one of my favorite Thanksgiving recipes is my grandmother's chestnut stuffing for turkey. So anyway, I just love chestnuts. Give them a try. They're great.
We warned you this was going to be a lot of passion for these ingredients.
Yeah, we can geek out on these foods. I'm sorry, you can tell me to stop.
And I just learned that you need to keep chestnuts refrigerated, like the whole nut.
Yes.
Oops.
Yes. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Put them in a paper bag.
Yeah.
Put them in a paper bag and put them in the crisper of your fridge.
I also learned that you can make bread with chestnut flour and you don't need to add like gluten or anything. Is that true?
Erin is looking at me. I don't know. I haven't made bread with chestnut flour yet. But it's true.
I think it's true. Does anyone know?
Yeah, I was going to say it makes great cookies. It makes amazing cookies, and it makes like a tea cake, right? But because it doesn't have any gluten, you can't really use it. It doesn't rise. Gluten is the muscle, right, that makes bread rise. So it's better as a tea cake.
Are the like Origins 100% rye bread? Do they have any like leaveners in them?
Yeah, rye has gluten, so you can use the yeast in it, or you can use sourdough with it. Yeah, you're going to get if it's 100% rye, you're going to get a different result. And same thing with, has anybody worked with currants? Do you guys all know currants?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right? And that's got a different gluten balance. Mm-hmm. So you can make a loaf of bread with it, but it's going to be different. The texture's going to be different. The flavor's going to be different. It's delicious. It's just going to be a lower, denser loaf. Yeah.
We're getting into these more technical questions. Does anyone have any more?
I'm sorry, what?
Does anyone have any other questions? This is my first time moderating. I don't have a watch. I barely have a mic. Okay, so any questions?
I see a gentleman back there has a question.
Do we want to bring the mic to
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're doing fabulous. Yeah, you can cut me off anytime, too. All right.
I was curious for hazelnuts specifically, because you mentioned that there's such a fast-growing, or like market-wise, such a fast-growing like plant-based protein.
The tree itself is not fast-growing. It takes 5 years to produce
But
nuts.
in terms of like popularity, is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about? I
Yeah.
was curious then with hazelnuts, is there any work or like thoughts that you've had when it comes to developing hazelnut recipes that have hazelnuts as like the centerpiece protein for the meal in the same way you can use soy and process it into tofu and have that be the primary protein?
That's a great idea. That'll be in my next book. No, and I'll credit you. That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. I hadn't, I always think of it as something that's added to salads, or, you can take hazelnuts and grind them and make them into a base for a soup. That would be good. I've never tried making pasta with hazelnut flour, but maybe we could. Yeah. Have you?
Yeah.
Have you had experience? Yeah. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's the the proportion, right? So like a little bit of hazelnut flour or crushed hazelnuts even would go quite a long way in flavoring like just a regular pasta dough. So I wouldn't know what like the proportion would be to actually get it to replace or what you do with soybean, but just in terms of added flavor and depth and nuttiness, that's what a lot of the chefs that I worked with and what I would try to kind of, when I was a curious eater about it. But that's a very interesting thought, to think of it going beyond flavor or an added and then making it a base. Because I wasn't able to use just that hazelnut flour as a base for the pasta dough. You have to mix it in with a double O or something else.
Yeah, and also think about it, they're using cashews, right, for cheese, for a non-dairy cheese. So there may be applications like that that could be really interesting. So yeah. Yeah, I was going to say we're in Wisconsin. Forget I said that. Sorry.
I just sort of wanted to maybe use this as a segue. When Fran mentioned, using a little bit of something to expand I'm just thinking about all the folks in the audience and how difficult it is to find these products on the supermarket shelf, right? And actually even kind of difficult to find them at your farmer's market. I mean, who has a farmer's market where elderberries are brought in? So there's this challenge of how to get these products and how to use them economically. And I asked Mark Ballerine, who's a black currant grower, and he makes a jam. I asked him to come and be in our group today in the conversation, and also Tony, who runs Viroqua Aronia, also, because these are growers, and it's quite a circuitous and complex route for me as a professional chef and recipe developer to get these products. And I'm just trying to imagine how it is for folks out here. So as we go along, I'd be very curious if anyone would like to share how they do it. But I wanted to just mention a tip that works for me. Something like black currant is a very, very powerful ingredient, very powerful flavor. And I actually find I like working with it best. I just stash away a 5-pound bag of frozen, individually quick frozen black currants. I just keep them in my freezer. And then if I'm making a blueberry pie, I'll throw a handful of the black currants in, and it will transform the pie into something that everyone remembers for the rest of their life. Similarly, maybe if I'm making a beet salad and I want a vivid and bright vinaigrette, I'll take some blackcurrant jam that Mark so lovingly supplies me, and I'll just emulsify my vinaigrette with like a tablespoon of blackcurrant jam and build it with some hazelnut oil and dress the beets with that, the roasted beets with that. And again, it's just memorable. And the black currants aren't shouting out the beets, they're complementing them in such an important way. I think with hazelnuts, maybe, we've got a similar thing there. We're using some to enhance a cookie flavor, to bring out the nuttiness. Or the chestnut flowers, thinking about it, chestnuts are naturally sweet. And Fran, is it correct we have a recipe that you gave a recipe with using chestnut for the resources?
Fran will add one.
She's a busy girl defending our democracy. That's okay. We love you. Anyways, but I was just thinking about like chestnut flower. It has that natural sweetness, and something I've observed as I have years accruing on this planet is I'm pretty sensitive to white sugar. I have to really keep it to a minimum. And so I'm always looking for things that have natural sweetness. So the chestnut flower is intriguing to me to make a little tea cake or something where I maybe don't have to add a whole lot more other sweetener. And on the Aronia, the pumice has been kind of fascinating. I want to ask if people here enjoy like raisins or craisins, the cranberries that are kind of have a little bit of sugar that kind of makes them sort of chewy and delicious. I mean,
so what you got was the Aronia that's been
that's just been pressed. Okay, so you've distributed the aronia around? Okay, cool. So you'll notice it's not very sweet or not very tart, but texturally, it's just got some really cool action going. It's got that nice chew. But where I'm going with this idea of the craisins that are slightly sugared, is I could really see these aronia berries slightly sugared and, a little bit more on the treat level now with that sweetness, but how that would bring out, that would just bring out so much of these subtle characteristics of the aronia. So I want to encourage people that are involved in manufacturing, including challenging myself at my own test kitchen, to just explore this, of adding a little bit sugar to the pressed aronia pumice. And why? Well, because if we can find this second use for the aronia berry after the sexy, pretty easy to sell aronia juice, then we're just making it that much more profitable and productive for our farmers to grow aronia, and we know it's a very future-friendly food, so it's kind of a win-win. The more we can figure out ways to get these products into our food lines.
You read my mind. I was going to ask, why is it so important to use the pumice or the flour after it's pressed? A lot of these, we call them waste products. Are they waste products, or are they opportunities for delicious foods?
It's called upcycling, right?
It's called upcycling, and I think
I have a
Beth
feeling
knows a
Beth
lot
knows-
about that.
Come on, take it away, Beth.
Actually, there's a lot of work being done on upcycling right now. Flour is being upcycled from spent grain from breweries and from distilleries, and it's really interesting. It's got a very strong flavor, the flour that comes out of breweries, but if it comes out of a distillery, it's almost neutral. And it's wonderful. They're doing that a lot with currants right now. We're finding that the schools are interested in it because it's loaded with protein. It still retains its nutrients. The work being done on upcycled wild rice is interesting. They're upcycling spent wild rice and milling that into flour. We may be seeing more of that pretty soon. And I'm not familiar with the upcycling that goes on with the berries that you mentioned, but I think it's a great idea because you're getting you're getting the nutrients, right? You're getting all the vitamin C. Those berries are just packed with antioxidants and with vitamin C. There was the whole rush for elderberries when everybody had COVID because they're so nutritious, and they're doing all kinds of work to suggest that they can become really powerful preventative medicines. The same thing with, I don't know why we couldn't do that with cranberries, for instance, when we press cranberry juice, but the hazelnuts are a wonderful example of upcycled foods, right? So anyway, it's going to become a big industry, I think, pretty soon.
I have a question for folks in the room. How many people have worked with dried elderberries and put them in their scone or their muffin recipes? Okay. How many people keep black currants in their freezer and throw a handful into this and that? Yeah. How many people are developing something with agroforestry products, for their home kitchen or maybe for their restaurant business or?
Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, here. You're going to have a seat.
Here, I'll run around.
Oh, no. Hi, everyone. I'm Lily. I am the currant and elderberry breeder for the Savannah Institute, so I'm doing a lot of tinkering around in my kitchen and stuff. I'm doing a little mini trial looking at different varieties of currants and how they turn into cassis and which ones have the best flavors. And I'm doing a little mini trial of what are the best ways to process elderflower and is there a taste impact? And so far, preliminarily, no, but I'm happy to talk about that, and I will release data on that when I have full data. So I do a little bit of tinkering, and I like making chungs, which is a fermented simple syrup, where you just put 1 part fruit and 1 part sugar, and you just let it sit in your fridge for 3 months, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Who else wants to tell us about what you're cooking up?
So So, as part of an outreach effort to get urban agroforestry into front and backyards, we're creating some opportunities to get people excited through tasting. And one thing that we're doing is we're creating a marbled marshmallow with ground elderberries, and if I could source black currants, yeah, that could be fun too, right? So the beautiful coloring of the marbled marshmallow with the melted chocolate and the graham cracker and community sitting around a campfire is how we hope to capture interest in our communities and to have the new generation, especially as we work with kids and producers, to grow our local food infrastructure. And then throughout that, thinking about best ways to get those into also all stages of life. So boiled chestnuts at the youngest and the end stage, right, where it's very easy to digest. And then also, nuts are so incredibly delicious, but if you have young children, you know that it's difficult to sometimes get nuts into their diets outside of nut butters. So grinding hazelnuts to where they're almost a powder, especially those Midwestern hazelnuts are ideal for this, and folding those into a banana bread eliminates the risk that you would have for young eaters. So we're trying to provide opportunities by creating a lot of accessibility, right? From age, from also ease of use. Most people are very familiar and comfortable with banana bread, right? But it's typically something that you put chopped nuts in. So just finding those access points, and then also something exciting and new like an elderflower lemonade that you can do a sip and stroll and see some of these demo sites in our county.
That's fantastic, and I agree. I used to cater, and I always said the cookie was the gateway dessert. You could put meadowlark flowers, whole grains in there, and people want to eat them. So thank you for that. That's really great. Anyone else want to talk about their experiments in the kitchen?
I guess one of the reasons I came here was to find ways, I manage 430 acres of land, so I don't have a lot of time to tinker in the kitchen anymore. I don't have a lot of time to, focus on perennials when you have to, make your bottom line with annuals, and like most farmers do. But the idea of perennials is an amazing thing, and I think it's where we really should be veering to. I guess, I heard from some panelists today that there's some niche Polish, equipment out there that you can get for harvesting. But, if we could have some local manufacturers focus on really, allowing us, the farmers, have an easier time, not only, cultivating our crop, but also harvesting. And then I know Mark Shepard's dealt with for a long time. He complains all the time about how he doesn't have the ability to harvest or post-harvest handle. And that's a real problem. So, if there are, small to mid-range, machines out there that could help us do that, then we could give it to the chefs, the home chefs, get in people's, in the stores, I think a little easier. And I'm sure, people are doing it much more than I have or will anytime soon. But for someone like me, it would make it a lot more accessible to start producing those crops. So.
To address your question, Odessa, I have a small business where we try to use all kinds of different crops, but I try to keep it really playful and not attacking. Like, hey, you need to change your palate and you need to open up your mind, and these issues are so big, because they are really daunting and scary. And I find that when I approach people like that, then they back off. But when I say, hey, have you ever tried this? And I have samples, and I turn it into a big botany lesson, people are really, really willing to open up and just at least try stuff. I started making stickers that said I tried something wild, and adults love them too. They get excited to wear the sticker around the farmers markets. And just, I think education is going to be one of our biggest advocates for getting people to open up to new things. Yeah. But I would agree with your comment about manufacturing and stuff. So I opened a commercial kitchen that's really small, and it's going to be a nice small co-packer for people.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
I was just curious if anybody has ever seen a perennial CSA. Like, I know we've got meat and we've got fruit, but like specifically geared towards more of these types of perennial crops, or like even a CSA add-on, you know, there's all kinds of ways that you can tweak that. I think that would be an opportunity, because I love cooking. I hate shopping and meal planning. Like, that's where the quagmire of all the ethics and everything comes in. And like, I'm sure you guys understand that. So I would love, either a one source CSA that I don't have to think about it, and I get, perennial pancake mix in my box every week, or even like an online store that has all of these in it, right? I love supporting our individual vendors here, but that, takes time and effort and intention and all that stuff that we're short on. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
There is actually, there is one in Minnesota. It's called the Perennial Pantry, and it's run by two really cool guys, and they not only sell the hazelnuts and the hazelnut meal and hazelnut oil. They, you sign up for it, you get a box of perennial foods every month. You can also buy their products online, but they sell kernza, flour, whole grain, and a number of other perennial foods. And, you sign up and you don't know what you're going to get in your box, but you get a box of perennial foods once a month, right? They also do some interesting things. They partner with the Forever Green Initiative out of the University of Minnesota, and they partner with Friends of the Mississippi River, which is a nonprofit. And with them, they also launch citizen science competitions. They had a kernza competition last year where people sent in recipes, and then they did a taste testing kind of thing, and promoted it that way. So I think that's been really instrumental in getting it out to families, especially that are interested in this, and using it as a means of working with their kids and talking about the value of these foods. So, I think we're not going to crack this nut until we become creative around how I don't know that you can go through the big food system to get these things out. I just don't know. I think a lot of what's happening is through these disruptors that are using really creative, risky ways to get their foods into market. And I think anything we can do as consumers to support that, and also to connect them with other resources, like nonprofits, like, universities. The University of Wisconsin's doing a fabulous job with hazelnuts. So those kinds of things, I think.
We're getting up to 4:15 here,
Okay.
so do we want to have folks?
One more. And I want to make sure everyone gets a snack. So, and then if our panelists want to say any last words after this comment.
Hello, I'm the Tony that Odessa mentioned, and I'm one of the co-founders with our founding farmer here, Craig, and our other co-founder, Jody, at Viroqua Aronia. Some of you maybe had the berries here and our juice, I think, over the weekend. And so I just want to say quickly, the idea of aligning all these elements is like our passion, basically. So the blood, sweat, and tears that Craig has put into cultivating acres and acres of Aronia and turning that into our juice. We have a plant, a small value-added plant in Viroqua at the Enterprise Center. Our neighbor is the American Hazelnut Company, so we already talking we want to do collaborations with them, and we're looking to form a collaborative platform and network of people to have a member-owned network where everyone can kind of if nothing else, just collaborate. So kind of as to what the panel was bringing up, and just make that almost like an entrepreneurial cooperative venture that's all about collaboration. And then our other big, tenet is base this all on trust, and that we're not going to sell out. We want to have this in the family for generations, and it's a pure product, and we want to just kind of work with other like-minded people in that way. Working with Odessa, for example, on developing products to do with our waste product, or the byproduct of the pumice, as everyone's mentioned here, and turning that into some amazing potential end products that then go with the other part is let's work with world-class people who have built amazing brands and create a buzz out there so that people can have the excitement of these products. And then the last part is that we're also partnering with Hometown Pharmacies, who is launching an amazing e-commerce arm. And they're open to saying, you know, what is the food as medicine, like the authenticity and the trust in what we put into our bodies. I'm also an emergency physician, so that's another part of my life. And so we'll have an entire, almost like end-to-end system to say, this is how we can take, at least in part, a way where we can collaborate together, build this cool brand, build a vibe around it, build, you know, a buzz, and then have distribution that is seeking essentially what everyone in this, you know, in this room is all about.
Does anyone want to say any closing words, or?
I just want to do a little shout out, little close. As you're enjoying your blackcurrant aronia rye brownie and your delicious hazelnut flour coin, just a big shout out to Meadowlark Organics for raising, you know, beautiful grains that we derived this rye from. And to Mark Ballerine and Nature's Keepers for raising these black currants and being willing to work with me as a chef on developing flavors with them. And shout out to Viroqua Aronia for these, you know, this brave initiative, and also a thank you to you, Erin, for putting me in touch with Viroqua Aronia and being such an amazing networker between farmers and cooks that you are. So I think those were just my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go cook.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please go get a snack. Thank you. Thank you.